Hello. Happy Friday. Anyone joining here? Um, so I'll say at the outset that hello. Oop, that's not okay. Friday. Anyone joining here? Um, so I'll say at the all right. Sorry, stream hiccup there. I keep iterating on my setup, and the latest version here. I'll close my Slack. Um, Involves me having a separate screen with my actual stream there. However, I neglected to mute it, so learn a little bit every time. Unfortunately, I keep changing things, so I keep introducing new stuff I have to learn. So anyway, as I was saying, I'll say at the outset here, I did not sleep great last night, so I'm a little bit tired. So hopefully I'm coherent enough to be followed verbally here. I think I have one hour at least of talking in me. And I mentioned on Twitter, in case anyone um, is interested, the Open Web Foundry is after this, which is a thing for people who are building on Arweave, businesses, projects, that kind of thing. So check that out. If you're following me on Twitter, you'll know where to find it. Okay, so give a little context here, as usual, for what I'm working on. The thing I want to do is work on documentation, which sounds kind of boring for a live stream, but I think it will actually be fairly interesting in the end. What I'm working towards, I'll show you what I have right now. I mean, there's not a whole lot to look at yet. This is still, ooh, okay. This is still pretty, that's fine. That's fine. This is still pretty early on. So, do that one. Okay, so I'm building this documentation. There's not a whole lot to see in the PDF. I just have some definitions. Basically, I have notes, and I'm trying to slowly assemble them into something a little more coherent that people can use. And yeah, I hope this is fairly intuitive, but I think when you're building a protocol or something you want other people to build on, having at least reasonable documentation is very important, because otherwise, people kind of don't know where to get started. They don't know what terms, definitions mean when you're talking about things. And I think the kind of worst case, especially when you're trying to build a lot of stuff yourself, is they might overwhelm you with questions. And so it can just save a tremendous amount of time if you have good documentation that people can follow. So when they ask you questions, you can be like, I documented that right here. Go look at that. Can save a lot of time. I think it should go without saying, but worth saying anyway, because there's a lot of projects out there that people are wanting to see built upon that do not have that. So anyway, that's the premise, right? We need good documentation for people to be able to build on things that we're building. Within that, I've been doing quite a bit of work on automation. So this is my Discord, which is not actually publicly open yet. That will probably happen over the next month. But one thing I want to be able to do is iterate on the documentation and get feedback on it rapidly. So I've been slowly building up automation that will post changes here, so you can see the different generations of it. First, I started with just posting diagrams. Then we get automatic posting of the design PDF. And then latest iteration down here is actually, I don't think I have an example of the diagrams. I'll show that in the testing channel. So the latest iteration of the diagrams is you actually see the versions of the diagram. I would love to be able to do like a diff, some sort of visual diff of the diagrams, but I'm not sure how to get that working yet. I also have a visual diff of the PDF, which is a little wonky because I don't think there's good, or I haven't found any great open source PDF diffing. So I have this. Let's see, a better version of that. Yeah, you can see, I mean, it does show you stuff, but it's got some weird artifacts, and I don't know. I may end up with just text diffs of the AsciiDoc that I'm building upon. Okay, so that's a little bit of context just about the documentation I'm building up here. There's a little more I need to talk about before I get into what I want to work on. Oh, and please, if you're hearing everything and following along, just give me like a thumbs up or some sort of indicator in the chat, because I'm just always a little wary of like whether my setup is working still at this point. Okay, so here's the source. I'm using AsciiDoc. I don't I don't necessarily endorse AsciiDoc for this. I think it's something I'm familiar with, and you know, as opposed to Markdown, Markdown is pretty meager in terms of like what you get with stock Markdown. You can't really, yeah. I mean, you get some markup that you can use to describe what you want the output to look like, but there's not a lot of semantics to it. You can't name things or refer to them in any way. Um, and if you want to build up a big document that's complex, um, I think that can be a problem. That said, there's plenty of problems with AsciiDoc too. So, you know, whatever, pick what you want for that stuff. So anyway, the the document here, um, pretty vanilla AsciiDoc at this point. But what I want to do over time is um, essentially start embedding the the output from various things in here. So yeah, so I mean, simple stuff is just gonna be diagrams. That's not that weird. So diagrams are gonna be embedded in there. Um, more uh, advanced things that will happen over time is I want to have schemas, and you know, I think I probably need to. I think it's just a little too confusing actually for me to have this stream up there because I'm getting visually distracted by what's going on in my streaming window. Because it all happens with a lag, so it's like a visual echo. Interesting. I'll just throw another window over there, and then I can switch to my stream to check on it if needed. Okay. Yeah, so sorry, anyway, learning as I go here. Design, right. So ultimately, I want to have things that are actual representations of the system embedded in the documentation. So this is an idea I've seen employed past places where I work. It's there's sort of a lineage to this, but the next chain in the link before me would be friend and coworker Aaron Brooks, who has this idea of live spec, which is basically and you know there's prehistory to this too. It's similar to you know, like literate coding, where basically you have a document that has code embedded in it, and then the output of that is actually the thing that gets run. So your documentation and your code are together. So Aaron has a variation on that he calls live spec. I've seen that fairly deployed fairly well and to fairly good effect. There's some tweaks I want to do to it. So I personally, this is just my personal take on it, do not like the having the source code embedded in the documentation. I prefer the reverse, where you extract things from the system, you know, diagrams, source code, whatever, and then embed that in the documentation. So just to repeat that, like one way you could write a system is you put things in the documentation that you then pull out into your source code. The other way is you have documentation that extracts things from your source code and puts it into the documentation. And the reason I like that, I mean, there's sort of a philosophical reason of I like to have projections of the system. So I don't want to make a map that generates a system. I want to make a system that generates a map. And I think part of that is just like a personal preference. I want to have a representation of the real thing. I always want my view of the system to be grounded in the system. I think in practice, you know, they can work out to be fairly equivalent. The other thing I've noticed is if you do that, embed a bunch of stuff about the system into the documentation, that actually becomes a point of coupling. So you might have documentation that spans a bunch of different things. I should really have like drawing I could do during this. That would probably help instead of just listening to me. But anyway, you could have a documentation that spans a bunch of different things, and then you pull bits out of the documentation to embed, to put into other systems. And that actually becomes a point of coupling. So now you want to change something in a subsystem, you have to go change the documentation. And I think I would rather overall like risk the documentation being slightly out of sync, like the generated documentation being slightly out of sync at some point, versus introduce that kind of coupling. Because my past experience has just been that can kind of slow things down. And I'm sure there's ways you can work around that. And you get into the debate of like, okay, if you're now moving this stuff out of the documentation, you may not actually update the prose at the same point. So there's definitely a trade-off there between forcing updates to the documentation versus enabling change to the system. That's just kind of where I land personally and philosophically, is that I do not want to impede updates in the system for the sake of absolute consistency in the documentation. Also, there can be kind of a bootstrapping problem too. Like if you starting with documentation to generate source code is a very heavy thing. And I've seen people start that way and realize, oh no, this is way too slow. I need to start iterating the source code. Some of that is just learning about the technique, but I think the way you do that, extraction from docs versus extraction from source code, can have an impact on that. Okay, so the thing I want to try today is taking a bit of Malli, which again is like a closure schema language. I want to take a little bit of Malli schema, use it to generate something at least JSON schema-like, and then see if I can get that into my documentation. So, my first stream, which you probably mostly couldn't see the video for. I worked on this, and you can see a sort of subsequent version of this right here. This is the Malli schema for Arweave. So I'm going to start with some of this. Let's take this, put that over here. I don't actually want to embed the Arweave schema, but this is just like a good starting place. Why did my paste not work right? There we go. Okay, bloop. So I wrote myself some notes to get this thing started. So we want to generate some schema, maybe write some schema. Generate, I'm like a machine, I'm going to generate schema. Generate JSON schema, that's probably why I was thinking generate there, from the output, and then we want to export that to a file, and then we'll require all of this source code in the documentation repo, and then use that use that to generate the JSON schema that then gets embedded in the documentation. Hopefully clear. If not, I think it will become clearer as I work through this. Okay. So, yeah, I'll just leave this here for reference. And I should also, let's go look. I think I have written some tests that show usage of this a bit more. Yeah. So I'll just grab this here for reference too. Okay. So we'll get a comment block here. Let's see, just pull out the innards of this. Okay. All right. Registry schema, registry. Okay, yeah. It's like, why is this complaining? That would be, let's see, we also need the transform namespace. Yeah, because okay. So we have a registry. We don't need that namespace because I'm stealing this from my test. We have this thing. Let's see, why am I transforming it again? Transform. I guess I'm transforming it. so that I can explain. Yeah. So this will be transformed like all these values. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so now let's try to put together the actual schema here. So, again, going back to the context of all this work, it's basically to build a distributed mining pool for Arweave. The way that's going to work, actually, you know what? Maybe I could bring up my diagram. Let's walk through this quickly. Better versions of this are in the works. I think it's to use some coloring to sort of distinguish between where these different things live. Okay, double checking that. Okay, so you have Arweave servers doing the mining. It's going to send basically WSPORAs, which are like proofs of work, but they're proofs of work that don't clear the network difficulty, so they don't actually produce blocks necessarily. Those are going to go somewhere. Local file system is going to be initial implementation. They're going to get pulled out of there. Eventually, they go into Arweave itself, so stored out in the network. They then go to a governor component. The governor component figures out how to tally up the allocation for any rewards that were won by the pool. It's going to write a distribution plan to the Weave. The distribution plan then goes out to the distributor, which is going to redistribute tokens based on all that. I don't want to get into like extreme detail here. The main thing to note here, in that case I didn't say it. The distributor actually distributes the tokens. I'm not sure I actually said that part. So the main thing to note here is that you have this data that's going back and forth. And part of what I want to have is there's the description of this data, which is what I want the schemas for. So on the inbound, you're going to have these proofs of work. So that's sort of one schema element. At some point, they're going to get bundled up because you don't want individual transactions on Arweave for all of those. You kind of want to bundle them up and do bigger transactions. It's just more efficient in terms of transaction fees. And then we're going to have this distribution plan, and that's going to be another thing that we'll write schema for. I think that's actually it. It could be that there's more ancillary things or supporting things around this that get built up over time, but initially those are the main pieces of schema. So let's focus on one initially, which is just these weak proofs of work. And I'm going to do an extremely abbreviated version of that. The plan here is eventually we have the Arweave schema wherever that is here, so this one, which is, just copy paste over here, but you're going to have this schema referred to from this schema, but I don't want to go there yet. Initially, what I want to do is basically build out the schema over here to be just like a minimal version, and these things will come together at some point. So, I think it's good to namespace things, so we'll do that. Strongpool. I'm not going to put Arweave on this because this is actually Strongpool specific stuff. What will happen though is that this will end up referring to some of this at some point. Probably go through some iteration on that. Okay. So, so this can be a WSPORA, a weak spora, so to speak, and it's going to look like this. So initially, all I think I really care about having in here is just the hash. There is actually some code that's doing some of this already, and in order to get proof of concept going, you don't need to have the whole thing. All you really need to do is the hash that you can use for estimating the hash rate of miners. Okay, so let's just get that going. So we have the thing in the registry is WSPORA. We got hash, and let's just leave it at that for now. Try to keep things as simple as possible initially here while we wire everything up. Okay. Okay, yeah. So I'm running a test. What yeah. So in this context, let's do this. Let's just do a transform. Yeah, so we'll do def Spora. Actually, let me put that in here. I don't want that outside. Put that in my comment block so I can just use it for interactive stuff. Okay. Ooh, just realizing there's a neat testing tool I found recently, which maybe I'll bring that in here too, because that would be fun to show. Okay, so we want to refer to this. I've also contemplated doing this like this schema, because that would let me, I don't know, I'm still debating what I think of that. So in Clojure, I think I've mentioned this before, but like namespace keys are a kind of a convention. There's some little bit of built-in support for them. Well, a decent amount of built-in support is what I should say. But so when you do something like this, this first part before the slash is the namespace. And you do this just so that you can create maps of things that have keys from lots of different places and they don't collide. As you build big systems, especially systems that interact with other systems, namespacing is really important. Otherwise, it's like I say hash, well, someone else is going to want to use hash. You don't want a collision there. So namespacing is good. And namespacing is better than nesting in a lot of ways. So you could do something like have do strong pool. So I have like a map as a strong pool key, and then under there I have w hash. But the problem with this, whatever, my hash, a real hash. The problem with this is if I try to, if I extract pieces of this, they lose information. And then you're not really representing what you want to either with this. What is this strong pool thing? You're just, this is an artificial thing. The thing that's actually namespaced is the value, not this map. So yeah, namespacing is good, and other languages should support us more for namespacing data because it's very important. All right, so let's see. Let's construct. Do I have an example? Yeah, I should have an example in my test. Hash, do I not? There we go. So let's grab this hash, which I think all this data was originally I grabbed from the Arweave documentation too. So who knows what that refers to originally. Okay, so let's see. We got a WSpora. It's got a hash. I should come up with like an official way to say that. WSpora, WSpora. Don't know. Gotta workshop it. Okay. So we'll take this here. All right. So if I evaluate, oops, I bet I'm not connected yet. Yeah, that'd be good. All right. So I'll connect my REPL. Hopefully, too, I did not check this. I should have checked my dependencies, and I forgot to do that. Hopefully I have Malli in here. I do have Malli. Good. Thanks, past me. Okay, so if I load this now, hopefully, yeah. And let's see, comma, gets me the REPL, yeah. Although I don't really need the REPL. Okay, so load this, should load the schema. It's def or WSpora here, or the registry actually, so which is a registry which contains schemas. Oh, but you know what? I left this. Yeah, let me put this back. So I don't think I completely finished my thought either on the namespacing. One thing I was going to say, so you can represent, say I wanted to call this schema like that. You could represent that also as hash, I think. Let me double check that. Yeah, so, and what's happening here is this is just a shortcut to use your current code namespace as the data namespace. The problem with doing this is, one, you don't necessarily want your code and data namespaces to match up all the time. There's reasons you might do this in the code context, but sometimes you kind of want different naming schemes for those. And I believe there's been hints that Clojure is going to support more flexibility for aliasing schemas in the future. Or I'm sorry, aliasing namespaces for keywords. So, sorry, a little bit scattered there. Hopefully you can follow all that. Okay, let me go back to this version. Okay. Got the registry, got the WSpora, and if we transform it, yay! It's not really doing a whole lot yet. It's basically just outputting what we gave it. However, if I were to throw something in here that didn't match the schema, some parentheses or something, see what's that going to do. Oh, interesting. It strips it out. Good. No, it didn't. I didn't evaluate it. So that's interesting. It transform, I guess, does not do any schema validation. So we get a transformed version. That's fascinating. So this, I would expect, will complain, though, right? Yeah, E. There we go. Errors, yeah. So it doesn't like that. But if we take out this, it should be okay. Yeah, no. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so let's take this thing, just for ease of iteration here. I don't know how much I'll be changing that. Just put that in there. Get rid of my little keyword comments there. All right. Yeah, so that just evaluates to nil because there were no errors. Okay, so we have a little schema. Again, fairly minimal, but I like to sort of end-to-end round trip things and then add complexity later, because it's always easier to iterate on something that's working first. Okay, so the next step would be generate some JSON schema output. Now, I'm not sure how far we'll get on that, because what's going to happen is, well, let's just start doing it and you'll see. The JSON schema, I've played with this just a tiny bit, but all right, yeah, so let's grab this guy. All right, so what's going to happen here is take this JSON schema transform. Let's grab this thing. So we got the schema, and we're making a decoder. We don't care about the decoder in this case. What we want to do here is JSON schema transform. Okay. Yeah, that's right. So it takes a schema and then it's going to output something JSON schema-like. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so you can see what happens here. What we're getting out of this is basically a Clojure data structure that's JSON schema-like. It's not actually, it's not in JSON format yet. If we take it all the way to JSON, I don't know if there's a super convenient way to get that pretty printed out of Clojure. I guess we could just try that and find out. So, I'm not sure. Cheshire is the, yeah, I'm gonna have to put a little more context in there for Google. Not good at reading my mind. Cheshire is the main closure JSON library I'm familiar with. Preprint? Ah, it does. Okay, okay. So no, this is good. I wasn't sure there would be a convenient way to preprint it as JSON, and obviously, compact representation is fine for programmatic use, but in documentation, you do want it to look nice, be readable. Okay, so fair enough. Let's try that. So let's take, I'm going to need, I need to add a Cheshire dep here. Oh, is there no flow jars link? Guess not. Interesting. I suspect at this point there's actually possibly a better, I think even bookmarks, a better closure JSON library that I should use, but Cheshire is fine. We'll just go with it. It's not the most important thing. That's easy to change. Okay, yeah. There you go. So 5, 10, 1. Grab that. Put that in my deps. Ooh, did I open that in Vim? No, I don't want to do that. So open that over here. Sort those because sorting is good, makes your diffs happy over time. Well, okay. Yeah, let's take that and schema. Q, quit reciter session, go into it, because I don't know of a super awesome way to dynamically load new dependencies. There might be one, but I don't know. Don't know it myself. I think that's also something that's going to be worked on more in upcoming closure versions. All right. So, got our Cheshire dependency in there, and require Cheshire core for just the basic stuff. Core, I'll say as JSON, maybe, no. I'll name it what it is. Yep. Good. Oh yeah, I've been trying to, I don't know. I think I've settled on actually formatting my requires like this. I think that's more common. I have done it like this in the past just because I think it's a little easier to sort, but I should probably be using like closure LSP or something to do that anyway. So I'm trying to conform to the community convention more there. Okay, so if we do this, reevaluate this guy, everything loaded. So this should still give us nil. This should, yep, should close that just so you see actually that's in the, yep. Okay, so now let's use our closure threading macros too, because that's fun. Also just going to check, make sure my stream looks happy. Does look happy, cool. Not a lot of viewers, but that's okay. These things always get more views afterwards. I can warn people too if one of them doesn't go well, so it's probably more optimal for your time to view it afterwards. Okay, so let's see. This is outputting our JSON schema. Yeah, let's thread this thing because threading is fun. Oops. So schema. Oops. A little too much raising there. There we go. JSON schema transform. And then we want, let's see, what was the syntax for that? So we got generate string and pretty true. Okay, so Cheshire, generate string, and yes, data structure is first, pretty true, and I will need parens around that, otherwise closure has no idea what I'm doing. So again, for folks who may be newer to Clojure, this is equivalent to doing a. I should do this. So A, B, C is equivalent to doing C, B, A. It's just because reading Lisp from the inside out can be weird and unintuitive, even for people who know Lisp things pretty well. If you're doing something that's more like a pipeline, the Clojure way is like this. And it's basically just a macro that transforms this into this. And then there's one that also threads the thing through, but puts it in the last position, argument position. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so this should, oh, cannot encode object of class. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's see, it's actually putting a literal regular expression in there. Interesting. Huh. I would have thought that it would have turned that into a string. I wonder, okay, so let's take a look. Can we just use a string here? I think it might support. Let's look at the Malli documentation. So regular expression. Okay. Yeah, so I think Malli itself supports just using strings to describe the regular expression, and so let's just do that. So it's a good thing to learn. Okay, so we take that. All right, so then we have a string there. Let's go ahead and just to verify, oops, now that will still validate, so let me put it like a symbol in here, like a star or something at the end. So this should give us an error, right? Yes, good. So the regular expression is still doing its job. And if we make it match again, and I would expect if we generate this guy, yeah, so now we have a string here. So again, another little Clojure subtlety. This with a hash mark here in front is an expression, a regular literal for a regular expression. If you remove it, this is a string, but I guess Malli knows that it should convert strings in these this regular expression vector to regular expressions. However, it doesn't know that it should convert regular expressions to strings if you're actually, it might even not have a string representation for them if they come in as regular expressions. I'm not sure. But anyway, it doesn't know how to do it the other way. So that's fine. We can just leave it as a string. And then when we generate our JSON schema, we get a string out. So this should work now, I hope. Let's do this. How does that print? It prints terribly because now it's a string. Yeah. Okay, so let's take this whole thing and we'll just do, make sure I get my argument order right here. Interesting. I wonder, can I just put a, I forget, can I just put a, unfortunately I have to thread last. I guess that's fine. Just put a thread last there. Unresolved single spit. Oh, yeah, my linter's complaining because this is a CLJC file, which can be run in ClojureScript or Clojure, and ClojureScript is not going to know about this. It's platform specific. That's fine. I'm going to ignore it. Yeah, okay, I guess that works. Let's try. Yep, okay, out. Okay. Interesting. So I think we have a little bit of an issue here, Just trying to see. I might keep going anyway. I think what we're going to need is a function that takes the JSON schema-like thing and manipulates it a little bit. What I'm looking at in terms of an issue is this. I'm not super up on how JSON schema works, but my read of this is like, okay, we have some definitions, then we have references to the definitions, and if you look at our definitions here, I should just look this up in the JSON schema spec, but I'm not sure this colon here is correct. I think that might be an artifact of the fact that these is all keywords underneath, and here the colon gets stripped, and here it doesn't. But this could actually be the way you refer to it in JSON schema too. So let's find out. Ultimately, I think I will transform this because despite all my talk of namespacing, etc., I'm not 100% sure that I want the namespaces going into what's put on Arweave. I guess I'm still debating that a little bit. The trade-off there is if I put namespaces in there, I probably should compress this thing, at least ultimately, because the namespaces are just, they're just repeated strings that are going to take up space, and over time that cost adds up. I may be overthinking it though at this point because the cost of the transaction is going to be very low initially. Anyway, yeah, just defer that whole line of thinking, not important now. Okay, so we can have a ref. Let's just do a search here for ref. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I think that colon is an artifact. Don't think I'll worry about it now. Yeah, I think I'll just make a note to myself that to do transform schema to clean up keyword references. So yeah, I think this is not actually valid, but I'm not going to worry about it now because my main focus now is just getting something that kind of round trips into the documentation if I can, and getting distracted with a lot of little side quests or whatever. It's not going to help me get that round tripping going. Okay, so we have the registry. You know what? One question I would like to answer right now is, so I'm going to grab this. That. Just do, let's call this W2. I'm curious if when I put another thing in here, if they both print out. So if you look at what I'm doing here, I'm telling about okay, this whole thing is a schema, and the schema is to have sort of like as an argument the registry, and then we reference the thing in the registry that we're using. And the way I envision this working in the documentation is I'm going to have a section, I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but it's going to be something like, okay, we have a schema here, and then under here you have, like WSpora and Spora bundle and something like this. Distribution plan, something like that, and then each one of these will individually have its schema, or at least that's my current thinking. Maybe I'll just print out the entire schema and have annotations in it that describe that. That may actually make more sense, but just keeping on this current line of thought for a second. So if I take this, what I want to know is, can we print out a subsection? Oh, right, I still have the, where did it go? It went in the file. Okay, so just double check. I evaluated that. And so I'll change this to WSpora 2, evaluate the buffer again. Okay, interesting. So Fascinating. I wonder, can I get it to print out multiple things? So this is actually what I wanted, um, because it's only printing out the exact thing I'm referring to. Can I do this? Does this work? I'm not even sure this is like a semantically valid thing I'm asking it to do here. No, that doesn't like that. Okay, well I don't want to pursue that too much because again it's a little bit of a distraction from the goal I'm trying to achieve here of getting things to round trip into the documentation. So that's interesting though. If I have a bunch of things in my registry and I tell it, okay, use this one, it's only going to grab the dependencies for that one and print them. Which means, it's interesting, I think it means that if I had like a WSPOR or a WSPOR bundle, what I end up with is the definition for the WSPOR in there twice. When actually what I might want is just to print the whole thing with all the references. Interesting. Figure that out in the future. Okay. Yeah, so let's take this little thing and turn this into a, we'll just call this defend dump schema. Actually, nah, spit, just matching the closure. So let's see, what are our arguments? So F content options, F schema. I don't know if we actually want options in this case, but we'll just keep it like that. Okay, we'll take the little bit of code we have down here, put that here. So our schema, yeah, let's go ahead and start replacing this down here. So I'm gonna have spit JSON schema and this guy. Actually, we'll put it in the let. Why not? And this becomes out JSON and schema. Try to think that argument order makes sense. Not sure. If you're threading, well, I don't know. I could kind of see arguments either way, but anyway. Yeah. Okay, so we want to generate the string, and then this becomes F. Oh yeah, and we have some redundant stuff to let. So spit JSON schema, where we're sending it, where we're spitting it to be consistent here. We transform it, generate the string. Looks okay. So if we evaluate, ooh, wait a second. What's it complaining about? Oh yeah, this thing is probably there's probably something horrible going on there with my commenting. Okay. Okay, the buffer evaluates, and let's go back out over here, remove out, so no out file, and oops, go back here, evaluate buffer, evaluate our expression, got a nil, and voila. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here in 10 minutes because kind of want to line up with the Open Web Foundry in case anyone wanted to go to that. And also, as I mentioned, tired, so limited explanatory power in my brain today. Okay, so this, I believe, is enough to start wiring it into the documentation. So I have a registry, I have a way to output from that. Let's think about what that looks like, or if that's even the best way to use the last 10 minutes. I think it's reasonable. Let's look at it here. so here's our document. Ultimately, so let me get the AsciiDoc reference up here. Oops, not that one. Actually, what I want is AsciiDoctor. That's the thing I'm using to generate. Again, not like a heavy endorsement for AsciiDoc. It's just something I'm familiar with, and I don't think it makes a huge difference which thing you put in this slot. And it does have a lot of nice sort of like higher level semantic things versus, say, Markdown. Unless you're using one of the many different and incompatible Markdown variants. Okay, so what I want is right with ASCII docs. Here we go. Language documentation. Maybe a quick reference. Open both of those. So code, literals and source code. Okay. Ultimately, what I want to do is I want to reference another file. Here we go. Yeah, I think this is the syntax I would want. Source block content included from a file relative to source directory. Strip leading indentation. I see. So this is like specifying a source directory. Yeah, so this is going to look something like this. Oof. I have some sort of weird completion going on here in my. One of the downsides of AsciiDoc is there's like an Emacs mode that is okay-ish, but it's almost it's unawesome enough that I'm not sure it's a win for me to even use it. But you know, it's not too hard to put this stuff in your hands. So JS, JavaScript, just guessing at what it wants there. I guess ideally I want to do JSON, but I don't know if it supports that. I'll just go with JavaScript. And then we do something like include. Ooh, what's the tag? We'll just go with this version first. I don't know what that means, so I'll do include, and we'll take this cv out JSON to docs. Yeah, just put it at the root there. Yeah, let's see what that does. And build design PDF. Really? Oh, is it still just called? Yeah, I guess it's still just called build PDF. Okay. Not what I envisioned. What's wrong with my syntax here? Include out JSON. Oh, did I? Okay. And yep. Try that. Really? Oh, I didn't re-render it. I just opened it again. Include file not found. It's looking for it relative to the AsciiDoc. Well, that's fine. I don't know exactly what layout I'm going with. So I want to put that in source AsciiDoc. Yeah. Okay, getting pretty close here. I don't think I'll have it round tripping in the sense that it includes the source code that and then generates that, but getting closer than I thought it might. Nice. Okay, so this is pretty close to having something useful here. Syntax highlighting. Let's see. I wonder, is it even trying to do? Well, distraction. I don't know if it's actually trying to do any syntax highlighting on that or not, and that is certainly not where I'm gonna, not where I would put a page break. I think you can give it hints on that stuff though. I'll have to look into that. Okay, so what would be the next step here? So if I do tools, CLI, closure, what's that thing called? Tools, no. Tools CLI is the command line argument. It's tools depths closure that I want. So what I want to figure out is how I do include the schema code. Here we go. Yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. So for development purposes, let's go to my docs, depths. All right, so this is definitely something I'm going to comment out here prior to or after my experimentation, but we want, it's going to be net, Strongpool, schema, local root. Sorry for the jumping back and forth. It's probably a little iffy on the stream. Strongpool. Schema. It's gonna be interesting. Okay, so schema should do it. I think. Okay, so this. Okay, so I have a bunch of code in here that I use to do things like generate the notifications and yeah, build the PDF and that kind of thing. The thing is, it's not actually connection already exists. Are you sure you want to create a new connection? Yes, I do. So the thing about this is most of the automation code in here for like generating the PDFs or doing notifications, it's all run from Babashka, which is not actual Clojure, and it will not load Malli. When I'm doing development, I use real Clojure. So I'll probably need like separate namespaces that I run. So like one to generate the schema, and then one that I use for the automation, or I don't know. I may just run it all in Clojure and not do that in Babashka. Hard to say. But for the purpose of testing here, I'm just going to use regular old Clojure. Okay, so let's see. Can I require that now? Did my yeah, let's find out. So if I do require net strong pool, oops, dot strong pool schema. No. Okay, well, something's not quite right about how I'm doing this, but I want to wrap up here. So local root. Timelib. Interesting. Does this thing overall load? Yeah, it does. Interesting. That's strong pool schema, local root schema. That seems like it should work to me. I'm not actually sure what's going on there. So let's try looking at this. Net strong pool. Oh. No. Net strong pool schema CLJ. Interesting. Somehow my class path is not right. Source net strong pool. Source test. Checking all the things here. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Have to sort that out. But I think we'll wrap here. If anyone's listening and wants to go to the Open Web Foundry, do that. Um, thanks for showing up today or listening to this later. Apologies for my slightly less coherent train of thought. Probably put something in the description about that so people who listen afterwards can save time. But anyway, I'm pretty happy with the results here. Actually got a little farther than I thought. I wasn't sure I'd get anything all the way into the documentation. But I did. I think the main thing that's missing, oops, that's not the window I wanted. The main thing that's missing is just fully connecting the dots on the automation here. We are generating something that can be embedded. It just needs to be fully automated, the generation of this and embedding of this into the documentation. So that's it. Thanks for listening. See you next week.